Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to also express my views on this very important bill, which is long overdue. Madam Speaker, I want to start by congratulating Senator Margaret Kamar for this very, very important bill that is before us. Madam Speaker, as it has been said, this bill actually was passed in the last Senate, but it lapsed in the National Assembly, and therefore we have to reprocess it. Madam Speaker, maybe it's an opportunity for us to address this problem. The issue of Senate passing bills which go to the National Assembly, and then they stay there, then eventually they lapse. And likewise, bills which are passed by the National Assembly, and then they come to this side and they lapse. I think it's an issue that both houses must sit down so that the efforts of members of Senate or members of the National Assembly are not wasted because of petty disputes between the two houses. But Madam Speaker, going to the substance of this bill, I want to say that this bill is very timely because, as you are aware, Madam Speaker, that this bill is about Article 7(3)(b) of the Constitution, which provides the use and promotion of sign language as one of the languages in this country. So it will help us actualize this particular article of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, we also talk about Article 54 and 56 of the Constitution on the rights of marginalized persons, particularly persons with disability. So this bill, Madam Speaker, will go a long way in actualizing the provisions of the Constitution in relation to marginalized person or persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, though we talk about sign languages, many of us think that sign language is just one language across board. I am surprised when I was doing research on this bill that there are over 300 languages, sign languages, globally, which makes me think that maybe we need to harmonize sign languages so that we have one language across the world, so that we don't have an American version of sign language, we don't have a British version, we don't have a French version, we have one language. Because we must have an easy way in which this category of people are able to communicate with each other. But at the same time, sign language is just like any other language. It has grammar, it has rules of grammar. So it is actually a language on its own, which can be interpreted differently depending on where you come from. But I think global efforts should be put around developing a uniform sign language so that we can have an international standard around this. Madam Speaker, we also look at sign language as the form of communication between people who have speech impairment or people who are, have hearing impairment. But sign language can also be used by people who do not have this challenge. For example, Madam Speaker, if you are from different languages, maybe this can be an opportunity for you to express, you communicate among yourself without having to learn another foreign language. So it applies in both cases if you look at it, Madam Speaker. But most importantly, Madam Speaker, this bill has really tried to address all aspects of application of sign language, where it has talked about having this sign language applied in education, having a curriculum on sign language, and I think this will help in promoting quality of education among people with this challenge, Madam Speaker, because in the normal environment, they are disadvantaged. So by having a curriculum in place for these people, they will be able to learn in a better way. They will be able to maximize their potential, unlike having to learn in an environment where we do not have a curriculum in place. Madam Speaker, coming from the technology world, I know a number of my colleagues have not talked about this, but this has also been reflected in the bill about the use of sign languages in telecommunication. Madam Speaker, this is very important because in this digital era, I think it's important that we integrate sign language in our technologies. For example, in a Kenyan environment where almost 85% of people use mobile phones or telephony, it is important that the telecommunication network providers provide access to their network to persons of hearing challenges or deaf people. And I recently saw Safaricom making an attempt in this area by recruiting trainers or teachers of in this area. But I think more can be done. Looking at what happens in other countries, like in the US, we have a substantive law that deals with technology and hearing impairment, what we call the Hearing Aid Compatibility Act, which ensures that the technologies in place, especially in telecommunication, are all aligned to ensuring that persons with hearing impairment are able to access these services. Madam Speaker, it is also important to ensure integration of sign language in the healthcare. And I think it's important for doctors and health personnel to be trained in sign language so that they can be able to manage deaf patients better, so that they can get information from deaf patients, or the deaf patient can be able to communicate effectively with the persons providing health care to them. Madam Speaker, I know my colleagues have talked about education in terms of teachers. Madam Speaker, we have a serious problem in development of teaching resources in the special education in this country. Just last week, Madam Speaker, I visited TSC with some teachers from my county who have stagnated in one grade for so many years. For so many years. There is a particular case of a teacher who had even served as a principal of a school for 4 years, only to be told that you need to go back to classroom because you have not been upgraded to this. Madam Speaker, these are challenges that demotivate teachers pursuing this kind of specialization, and therefore leads to further discrimination of people with disabilities. So, Madam Speaker, this is one area that needs to be looked at. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, I think all teachers must undergo sign language training. All teachers, so that they can communicate effectively with learners, whether they have this disability or not. So my view is that we need to come up with a policy to ensure that as part of the process of training of teachers, they must be taken through sign language training so that they are able to understand different categories of their students, those who are naturally fit and those who also have these disabilities like hearing disabilities. Madam Speaker, this is a very progressive bill. Kenya now joins the rest of the world, 41 countries which have integrated sign language in their laws. I know we have it in our constitution, but now we are going to have an act of parliament to operationalize what Article 7 of the Constitution requires us to do. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to support this bill and say that this bill is very progressive for this country, and it will now officially make Kenya have 3 national languages, that is English, Swahili, and then sign language. So I support this bill, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
There's no one else to contribute, and I'd like to ask the mover to reply.